If you clicked on this video, there's a good chance that you're considering a move into Florida. The thing about Florida though is it's a pretty big place, and we get asked this question all the time is, how did you find out about the Emerald Coast? So this video right here, even if you are looking at moving into Florida, is specifically about the Emerald Coast. And even more specifically, we're talking pretty much the Pensacola area all the way over into Destin. A few of these stats that I am going to go over. We'll cover Panama City a little bit. That's a little bit further on the east side of the Emerald Coast. But we as a family though, we were looking at moving into Florida, and initially we were looking kind of like in the Tampa Bay area. We were looking kind of in the Sarasota area. Then we kind of started looking at outside of our Orlando a little bit. And I still to this day really can't tell you how we found the Emerald Coast. So I'm gonna tell you some pros and cons that we have witnessed personally, and then also some stats when we're talking about pros and cons of living in Florida, Emerald Coast edition. I always like to go over the cons first because I like to end the video with a good note. So let's go ahead and cover 5 quick cons, and then I will break into 5 pros. The first con when we are talking about moving into Florida, more specifically the Emerald Coast, is going to be the amenities. We came from a place in Colorado where we literally had a Costco within 5 minutes, a Top Golf within 5 minutes. We had malls, like we had 2 malls within 5 minutes of us. And if we wanted to go to a larger mall, it was only within 20 minutes. That is not the case here. And then the malls that we do have available in the Emerald Coast, they aren't that great. They're not that updated. They actually remind me of a mall that I used to have as a kid back in Colorado. You know, those indoor malls where it just seems like you have one central area and you have branches that branch off of that. They have different stores down each corridor of the mall. That's essentially what you're going to get here. So if you're looking for those new, those highly desirable, updated malls, you're not going to really find that here. Also, when we're talking about amenities, we're talking about those big box stores. Like I said, I mean, we're right next to Top Golf, Costco, and all these things. You are not going to find that in the Emerald Coast. Quick note on that though is they are looking at putting a Costco in Pensacola. I'm watching it consistently to see whether or not that is going to happen. Otherwise, you're gonna have to travel all the way up to Mobile, Alabama in order to access that Costco. So if you're looking at like IKEAs or any of those things, a lot of you watching this might not really need those things, but you just aren't going to find them in the Emerald Coast. And this is something that's super dumb, but my wife and I were like, you know what, we're gonna do this. We're gonna try and make this move into Florida. I was like, yeah, Wawa's, I love Wawa's, they're amazing. Wawa's aren't that present in the Emerald Coast. We are getting a few that are popping up, but one thing that I like to do when we do head down to, we have a property down outside of the Tampa Bay, Clearwater area, is I like hitting Wawa because that's one of my favorite things. Might not be a big deal for those of you watching, but it's not gonna be as Florida as like the bulk of Florida. Con number 2 in regards to the Emerald Coast is going to be the climate. The climate here is much different. So our winter does get cooler as opposed to central and then also south Florida. This might be something that you guys are looking for, but we have noticed that there are some people like, you know what, I want summer all the time, and even in the winter time, I want it to be warm enough to where I can wear my t-shirt, my flip-flops, and my shorts. You aren't really going to be getting that in the Emerald Coast. I wrote down a few quick stats when we are talking about like the lows. The months kind of differed a little bit when I looked at this, but I looked at like the lowest average in a lot of these cities, and so the 2 biggest ones, like Miami, so I'm looking at like South Florida, and then I pulled up Tampa to look more of that central Florida. So the lowest average in Tampa, if you look at the stats, is 57 degrees in Tampa. If you look at Miami, the lowest average is 61, where if we're talking about the Emerald Coast, more specifically, this is designated to the Pensacola area, your lowest monthly average is going to be 44 degrees. So it definitely gets chilly here. We did experience a couple days in the winter time where it did drop below freezing. And so it's one of those things you freak out because you don't blow out your lines here like we did back in Colorado or anything like that. So everyone's like, all right, make sure you cover up your spigots outside, make sure your hoses are disconnected and all those things, just to make sure that we don't have any freezing that is happening. Another thing that I am going to say on this climate, and something that we're looking forward to when we're moving here, is like, I love these hibiscus bushes that we saw all over in Hollywood, Florida, and I was really looking forward to planting those and like building a wall outside of our pool where we have these awesome hibiscus bushes. Well, in the climate that we're in, we actually couldn't grow them in the same way that you could over in Hollywood, Florida, and so we're like, oh man, you know, that kind of sucks. So you will experience different vegetation, you will get cooler temperatures, but you do truly experience 3 seasons in the Emerald Coast, where I'd say like Central Florida, okay, let's just say, you know, it's summer, mild summer, maybe a little bit of your fall, spring season. Down in Miami and South Florida, not so much. That's just pretty much summer and then mild summer. The third con when we are talking about the Emerald Coast compared to the rest of Florida is going to be your electricity costs. When we cover our cost of living many times on this video, we pretty much say utilities, but actually when I looked at your gas prices, the gas prices in the Emerald Coast are almost identical when we are comparing it to the rest of Florida. When we are talking about electricity prices, they are higher in the Emerald Coast as compared to Central and South Florida. Again, I wrote down a few stats that way we could kind of compare and contrast. So if we just look at the cost of living, I think we use bestliving.net, one of those websites. When we do this cost of living too, a lot of times what we do is your cost of living index for 100 is your national average. If it's above that, it's more expensive, and if it's below it, it's cheaper. I was able to find like the average electricity bill on 2 of these cities. For some reason though, I couldn't find the one on Tampa. So let's just talk about that cost of living index. Cost of living index for Tampa is going to be a 96 when we're talking about utilities. So again, this incorporates all of your utilities, not just your electricity. Miami is a 95.5, and then if we look at Pensacola, it's a 105. If I break into those average monthly costs for your electricity bills though, Miami came in at 127.65, so $127.65, where Pensacola was $136.54. We have definitely noticed a higher electricity bill up in the Emerald Coast as compared to a property that we have down in the Tampa area. I was looking back at my notes in the fifth con. It's one of those things that, like I said, it might not bother many of you, but for me personally, I was like, oh, you know what? I could kind of go without this, but at the same time, it doesn't bother me that much. But make sure you hang around to that fifth con. The fourth con that we are going to be talking about is going to be professional sports. We came from a city where we enjoyed going to those professional baseball games, football games, basketball games, hockey, all the great things. You are not going to have that in the Emerald Coast. In fact, I was actually looking at going to watch a Broncos game. I was going to have to travel almost 3 hours over to New Orleans because they were playing the Saints. And I was like, yeah, you know, that kind of sucks because I miss being able to do the tailgating, all the things that came with professional sports. And then the 2 other closest cities that are going to have those majority of those professional sports is going to be Atlanta, which is about 5 hours away, roughly. I think it's a little bit less than 5 hours away. And then Jacksonville, which is also right around 5 hours away. We have noticed, though, there is a ton of college sports fans here in the Emerald Coast. Us personally, we were always more about the, like, I guess professional football. That was our main goal. But so we came here, we were a little blindsided. We're like, we really don't follow any college sports. It is huge in the Emerald Coast, though. So if you're a huge college sports fans, you might find yourself at home in the Emerald Coast. The fifth and final con, like I said, which might be a little bit ridiculous to you guys, is pine trees. There are so many more pine trees in the Emerald Coast as compared to Central and South Florida. We've noticed this many times. I'm not saying that there's not pine trees in Central and South Florida. It's just nothing like the forest of it that we do have in the Emerald Coast. We had a bunch of pine trees around our house. I cut down a lot of them because like the pine needles get everywhere, the pine cones get everywhere. It creates a huge mess. And then also I came from somewhere where I could just see for miles, for 10 miles, 20 miles, 30 miles. I could just see forever. Here it does seem a little like I'm a little claustrophobic, and it does kind of affect me a little bit. I like being able to see for distances. We just went on a trip down to Orlando, and it was awesome that we were able to see for distances in a lot of the suburbia areas that were surrounding Orlando. Here you're not going to find that so much, where it feels like you're more in a forest. It feels a little bit more like Alabama than it does like Florida, where you have amazing palm trees. Again, we do have palm trees, but they are not as vast as you're going to find in like Central and South Florida. There are the 5 cons. We got them out of the way. Now it is time to break into those pros. Before I do so, if you are looking at purchasing real estate in the Emerald Coast, we are your top relocation experts to help you out with all of your real estate needs. Make sure you give us a call or text at that phone number right below. Right below it there, we always answer. It doesn't matter date or time, but if you're not quite ready to purchase, want to educate yourself on this Emerald Coast area a little bit more, we really didn't know about it, and so we like to bring as much information as possible to expose you to that. If you are looking at moving into Florida, smash that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, notification bell, that way you're notified every single time that we put out a brand new video. All right, first pro that we are going to be talking about in regards to the Emerald Coast or living in this portion of Florida is going to be climate. All right, so climate, you're like, Pete, what's up, man? You said this was going to be a con. We have also noticed that a lot of people that are moving here, that it's a pro for them because they are looking for a true season. So you're not going to get winter, you're not going to get the snow. Well, I've heard they've gotten a few dustings from time to time before we were here. If you are looking for that fluctuation in temperatures though, when we are talking about the seasonality of things, the Emerald Coast is definitely going to be more for you than Central and South Florida, where you don't get to experience those lower temperatures. It is just, there's something to say about those lower temperatures, especially when we're about to reach into holiday season here. It's just nice that it's being a little bit cooler, give you a little bit of a break from the summers that we do experience in Florida, and then you really get to enjoy that, enjoying the different clothing. My wife's huge into like the fall clothing, you know, the sweaters, the tights, and all those great things. So it's great that you are able to experience that within Florida and not constantly be somewhere where it seems like you're just trying to get away from the sun. The second pro, when we're talking about moving into Florida, the Emerald Coast, is going to be the schools. When we're talking about the schools, like I said, we're mainly talking about Pensacola over into Destin. We're going to be covering three counties. So starting on the far west side, Escambia County, that is mainly your Pensacola area right there. The niche grade came back, so we use all of our grades from niche.com. The grades for Escambia County is going to be a B, and that is going to be the lowest out of all these three counties. When we look at it though, Escambia County is actually rated the 42nd best school district within Florida. And you might say, you know what, that doesn't seem like a huge pro to me. It doesn't seem like the school's that great. Let's move a little bit further east though. So next one over is going to be Santa Rosa County. When we're talking about Santa Rosa County, we're talking about Gulf Breeze, Navarre, Pace, Milton. These are the counties that we're talking about. According to niche.com, Santa Rosa County is rated an A-, and when we're talking about those rankings with all of the different school districts in Florida, it comes in at 21. Next one over, we're going to be talking about Okaloosa County. What cities are incorporated in Okaloosa County? We're talking about Fort Walton Beach. We're talking about Destin. We're talking about Niceville. These areas are going to be in Okaloosa County. According to niche.com, this also comes in at an A- when we are talking about schools, and is actually rated the 7th best school district within Florida. We do have great schools. I can tell you that, even because we live in Santa Rosa, so we're sandwiched in between the two counties that I mentioned of all three of these, and the schools here are amazing. That's one of the main reasons we came here, was for our kids, and we have been super impressed. We came from a private Christian school back in Colorado, put our kid into public school here, and it has not been a letdown whatsoever. We have been impressed with the curriculum, with how much the teachers care about their students. It has been amazing what we have seen from the schools here in the Emerald Coast. The third pro when talking about moving into Florida, the Emerald Coast, we're going to be talking about the beaches. And the beaches I'm going to cover, I looked at, I think it's US News and World Report. They rated like the top 10 beaches in Florida. There are a few in the Emerald Coast that were in there, but personal preference, personal experience, we have been to, I'd say probably about a dozen different beaches within Florida. Hands down, I will take the Emerald Coast beaches over any of them. They are the cleanest. It's the soft, sugary sand. You got the emerald green water. That's how the Emerald Coast got its name, and they are just amazing. We actually visited our property down near Clearwater, and we went to the beaches there, and we're like, man, these beaches just aren't as great as our beaches. Ours are so much better. Another great thing too is you don't have to pay for parking. So if you decide to go to a beach down like near Clearwater, you have to pay for parking to go into that public parking there. That is amazing. Let me go to this new US News and World Report though. I'm pretty sure it's like the top 10 or 15 beaches, one of the two. So if we are looking at beaches, you got Santa Rosa Beach, which is pretty much 30A. It's just past Destin, Miramar area. That beach came in at number 4. Then of Destin, one of the most popular, tourist spots in the United States. That one came at number 6. And then Fort Walton Beach, which is just west of Destin, came in at number 8. We have fantastic beaches here, so I highly recommend you guys, if you have not experienced the beaches in the Emerald Coast and you want that beach living, check them out. See if it's something that you do like. And if the beaches are something that you're going to be taking advantage of often, you definitely have to check out the Emerald Coast. The fourth pro when we are talking about the Emerald Coast is going to be fishing in Florida. So I pulled up this report. It was from, I think, fishingbooker.com. If I'm saying it wrong, whatever, and you guys know what I'm talking about, correct me in the comments down below. But I pretty much looked at like the best cities or the best areas to fish in Florida. And there was 2 that popped up on the top 10. And so Destin was number 2 and Panama City Beach was number 3. We've actually helped a client who moved from the Clearwater area up into the Emerald Coast because he told us, I don't have any experience with deep sea fishing, but he says that he doesn't have to go out as far as he would in Clearwater in order to access that deep sea fishing. The fishing here From what I'm told, it's fantastic. Majority of the fishing that we do is in the sound or the waterway, so it's, you know, the smaller fishes, but I hear that when we're talking about that deep sea fishing, it is top notch in the Emerald Coast. The fifth and most controversial one that we're going to be talking about when we're talking about pros of moving into Florida, more specifically the Emerald Coast, is this area is super conservative. The Panhandle, we know, unless we're talking about like Tallahassee area, for the most part is super conservative. But when you go even further west, where it seems like it's a little bit more like Alabama, we get pretty darn conservative here. And that's something that we personally were looking for. We were coming from a super blue state that wasn't so blue before, but we saw how blue it got and we're like, you know what, I just want to go somewhere that has different morals, different values. We just want something different for our kids. You are going to find that if you have more conservative principles in the Emerald Coast. And so again, I just looked up, just Googled real quick, like the 10 most conservative cities in Florida, and 3 of them popped up. One of them technically it's not in the Emerald Coast, it's in the Panhandle. It's just north of like the Destin, Fort Walton Beach area. But the number 2 most conservative city was Panama City Beach. The number 3 was Crestview, which is that one that I was talking about that's like north of Destin, Fort Walton Beach area. And then number 4 was Fort Walton Beach. I can't tell you, like, we personally live in Gulf Breeze. It is super conservative here, and that's something that we were looking for, somewhere that we wanted to move our family into, and we haven't regretted the move once whatsoever. We love it. So if that's what you're looking for, a little bit more conservative of an area, that is a huge pro into moving into the Emerald Coast. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I greatly appreciate it. If you do want more information or you're planning on moving into the Emerald Coast, make sure you give us a call or text at that phone number right below. Right below it there. We always answer, doesn't matter date or time. But if you're not quite ready to purchase and you're just kind of in that education state, want to know a little bit more about these different areas of Florida, make sure you smash that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, notification bell, that way you get notified every single time that we put out a brand new video. Until next time, we love you. Bye.